Good evening, members.
Thank you for pointing out our incompetence.
Well, I thought you might like this now rather than when we're recorded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members.
Half an hour ago.
Let me do some housekeeping exercise. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, you know what to do. Please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Webcast of this meeting. Members, please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. Mobile phones, please switch off your mobile phones or turn them into silent. Apologies for the absence. Apologies received from Councillor Jones, that's why I'm here, and Councillor Perry. Are there any more apologies? Okay. None. Declaration of interest? Any declaration of interest? I'll take it as no. Urgent matters. I'm not aware of there being any urgent matters. Are there any urgent matters? No? Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on 2nd of September 2024. Are the committee happy that the minutes of the meeting held on 2nd September 2024 are in an accurate record?
Councillor Minnis-Bounds.
Yes, Minnis-Bound.
Just a point, if I may, Chair. I'm just conscious, looking at the minutes, there's lots of records of what the officers said, but no records really of what the portfolio holder said. And I just wondered whether we could amend it, because I'm just conscious that when we talked about CCTV, the portfolio holder said that she would take it away, look at it, and have a think about it. And that's not recorded at all. It only looks like we had a response from the officers.
Okay. Officers at that time for the CCTV report. Rob, do you have any comments on that? Would you like to amend this?
Well, I suppose it's not a comment. It's not a comment about the content. It's a comment about the minutes specifically, Chair, which is all the way through. It talks about the response being from the officer. The portfolio holder at the end of that whole discussion went through a couple of items. CCTV, I remember specifically because I raised it, but actually the only thing that's minuted are comments from officers.
Okay, I'll note it.
Can I just to say that it's a just to say that what was in the minutes was a summarised version of what was said. We don't minute everything that's said. It's just more. It was more a summary of what was discussed. I hope that answers it.
I think that is reasonable. You know, minutes means we should be recording everything that is being said, not every word as such, but should be summarizing everything.
I just think that in perhaps a moment of helping move us forwards, if I may, Chair, I absolutely get the summary point, and I'm not expecting it to be specific word for word, and there's a balance to be had, isn't there? But even a summary that said, the portfolio holder said that, made a comment that she'd listened to the points and was reviewing it. I would accept that as a summary, but it just looks like the portfolio holder didn't say anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If the comments actually exist, if you've got a record of the comments, then it might be for you to move a motion to accept the minutes with that amendment,
Okay.
with that comment included.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Ganesh, yes.
Thank you, Chair. If it was just a comment from the portfolio holder, that would have been something as part of a summary that's acceptable. But that was a commitment from a portfolio holder to go back and look into it and inform us. So isn't that something need to be included as part of the summary? Because that was a commitment.
Okay, I accepted that we need to amend the meeting minutes to include that the portfolio has mentioned and made a comment on this idea, and we will go through the records of the meeting video recording, and we'll include the summary of those as a statement. With that amendment, are you members happy for me to sign the meeting minutes?
Councillor Ganesh knows it was a commitment to your name there.
Council Film.
We need to have a motion. Okay, with that amendment. Okay, with that amendment, the meeting minutes will be approved. Is it okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This will be recorded in the meeting minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Adoption of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy 2024. Officer Rob Rubber, please introduce the report.
Good evening, councillors. I'm trusting that you've all read through the report and the officer written responses to the points that were raised by the trade. Those were of a fairly minor nature, but there is a written response to you for you to have a look at. There is obviously some minor concerns about training. I think the difficulty with the training is that it is mandatory for us and for drivers. Drivers like to be out earning money, unsurprisingly, and therefore anything that prevents them from doing that is never well received. However, we all know the priority of drivers being able to spot safeguarding concerns and to be able to deal with all passengers in a safe and appropriate manner. So whilst we acknowledge the comments made, we will not be withdrawing the requirement for training. We do, however, constantly look at how we provide that training and how our contractors provide the training, and we'll always seek to do so in the most cost-effective and practicable way, whilst ensuring that the training is effective. And unfortunately, whilst drivers may like to have a 5-minute training session and call it the day, that isn't going to be adequate for our purposes. So there will always be a tension there, which I think is unresolvable, but we will do our best to ensure that the unhappiness is kept to a minimum. Driver turnover and retention. Again, we are always mindful of the challenges that are imposed by the statutory process and the safeguarding points that we put in as an authority. Please remember that our priority has to be public safety. That is our legal requirement. Also, a lot of the new regulations that have come in have been brought in by His Majesty's Government and are, again, non-negotiable. We have to do them. They are statutory. And that's certainly been the case for some of the more recent stuff, which I think is the stuff that some of our longer standing trade members are finding slightly egregious because it's new, but unfortunately it's also mandatory. So we do that as best we can. Other than that, we didn't have a huge amount of input back from the trade, which is good. Which seems to be that it seems to be reasonably hitting the mark. certainly any changes that we've made to the policy have been fairly minor. A couple of minor alterations to the points and some of the wording in the points points element have been gone in, but that's pretty much it. I don't know if there are any questions from the floor, and I will clearly happily take any of those.
Councillor Fillmore.
You're talking about retention, Rob. Is our average age still quite high of drivers on the ranks?
Certainly our rank age is still fairly high. Our private hire one is much lower. And we actually had the first new Hackney carriage applicant for a very long time the other day, which I consider a very positive move. Long way to go, and it is certainly the case that some of our older members of drivers are retiring, and the moves that we've made to improve access to the new vehicles have been well received by the trade. We've now had 4 vehicles that we've supported as an authority licensed through the grant process, including our first white one. So we've had 3 black and 1 white LEVC vehicle. We've had to change the wrap to accommodate this. I don't think LEVC are particularly adventurous with their colour schemes. I don't think we're going to get a pink one. We'll license them whatever colour they come in, quite frankly. Every one of those takes 10 tonnes of CO2 out of the atmosphere compared to the diesel ones.
Councillor Minnesbaum.
I wasn't going to raise it here, but as you've wandered into that area, Rob, I'm just conscious of what was announced in the budget this week, because actually I think the trade was quite concerned and had done some lobbying before the budget about the plug-in taxi grants, which had already been reduced from 7,500 to 6,000, and I think they were hoping that there would be an announcement about it being extended beyond April 2025, and that being seen by the trade as the sort of intermediate step before going fully electric. I just wondered, do we know how many of those people that we've got that have taken even that grant, as the sort of intermediate step?
I can safely assure you the word all of them will be. Yeah, I mean, effectively that's wrapped up into the pricing that LEVC offer the drivers. What we've done is we have made the scheme as open as possible for drivers. So in the same way that we don't specify the colour, we don't specify whether the vehicle has to be brand new, we don't specify it to be second hand, it can be anything they do, and the drivers then have the ability to negotiate a deal, if you like, with LEVC that suits them. So I know, for example, that at least one driver has purchased the vehicle outright. Yeah. And the other, at least 2 more have got it on the PCP. So, it's very much of what suits their finances. They can also use the grant to reduce their overall interest payments if that's what they want to do. So they can use it very flexibly.
Any more questions, members? If none, does the committee agree to adopt the draft Hackney carriage and private hire policy set out in Appendix 2 to delegate authority to the regulatory service manager in consultation with the chair of the licensing committee to consider the objections received and to make any necessary modifications and set the date that the variation shall come into force? Do you all agree? Thank you. Now moving to the agenda item number 6. Again, over to you, Rob.
Right, I have to dash your powers and desires of megalomania here, committee. We've had a minor legislative change, which now means that rather than being approved by you as a committee, this now has to be approved by the executive. So hence you have a minor change to the recommendation for you. However, we will consider the tariff here. So the tariff that we've had was last amended in 2022, which those of you who can cast your mind back that far will remember we were very much in the cost of living crisis at that point in time, just post-COVID, when there was a substantial increase in costs due to restrictions from the COVID period. And following a request from the drivers, we took a rather simple and swift action of putting £1 on the drop, which is basically the minimum tariff of getting into the vehicle. So it was very quick, quiet and to the point, but it addressed the immediate concerns of the trade. However, we are now 2-3 years on from that, and inflation has struck us, as we all know from our own budgets, and drivers have been no different to that. Whilst I am pleased to see that the budget did not hike the cost of diesel fuel, and the fuel cap remains, nonetheless the cost of insurance has risen considerably, as I'm sure any of you who drive your own vehicle are aware, and the trade has been similarly afflicted. So there is a substantial increase in their operating costs. Also, with the uptake of the new vehicles, which let's not forget are, even with our £5,000 grant and the plug-in grant and any other deals that they can do, have a list price of £65,000. Drivers making that investment, or operators making that investment, wish to know that they are going to receive some income from the vehicle. So with that in mind, we were approached by the trade with a substantial number of the drivers, far more than is required, to request a fuller review of the tariff. So we have sat down with the trade and agreed a revised tariff. That tariff resolves a number of issues. Firstly, it greatly simplifies the tariff. If you have a look at the old tariff card, which I can't remember where it is in the agenda pack, it talks about things like the first 2/12 of a mile costing so much, and then the next 15/12 of a mile costing something else, and then, you know, it's just crazy. We've got 15ths of a mile, 12ths of a mile, 10ths of a mile, and any other random selections of a mile, really, which make it impossible for anybody to work out what a journey may cost. So with that in mind, I think it's page 118 if you are feeling that you might want to be bamboozled. With that in mind, we have shifted to a very much more standardised unit of 1/10 of a mile, which is makes the maths pretty straightforward. If it's 20p a tenth of a mile, it's going to be £2 a mile. Simple as. Nice and easy. And where necessary, we've also tweaked the drop, perhaps by 10 or 20 pence. So overall, there is an increase in income for the driver, but hopefully in a way that does not significantly penalise the users of the Hackney Carriage service. There was a time when taking the cab, or a black cab, was more expensive than private hire. These days, that's not necessarily so. Black cab is actually very cost effective these days. So I'm putting this to you for your consideration, yeah, but it will be put to the executive in the after the consultation period, which is 14 days. So it's a 14-day public consultation. If there are no objections or objections are withdrawn, then it will go to the executive. And if there are any objections, then it comes back in. We look at the objections. We don't have to change anything at all. And then it goes back out for approval again. So it's a slightly strange system, but it is the system that the law gives us, as is so often the case in taxi licensing. Would you choose it? No. Is there an option? No. So I put forward to you the process there. If you have any comments to make, I will cheerfully receive them. But other than that, is there for your consideration.
Councillor Hart.
Thank you. I wondered whether the 14 days is part of the process that's mandated from up on high, because that seems like an exceptionally short consultation period. I don't necessarily keep a daily eye out for these things appearing. 14 days is really not a lot for Joe Public to find out about this.
Yep. It's mandated.
Okay.
As I said, would we choose to do it this way? Probably not.
Yeah. Councillor Minnesman.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, just a quick question. I'm conscious that the trigger was or appears in the report to be a request about a £1 increase of the flag, but it appears from the new tariffs, that's the one bit that stayed the same, and actually the change has gone up everywhere else bar the flag. And clearly you've had that conversation with the trade. I just wonder whether you could briefly just talk us through how we've started at A and got to B.
So yes, as I always say, setting a tariff is as much an art as it is a science. And there are three variables that you can change. You can change the drop, you can change the rate per mile, and you can change the subdivisions of the mile. And as you can tell by the old tariff, the subdivisions of the mile have been changed quite a lot over a long period of time. So when we were approached by the trade, they made some suggestions to us as to what they wanted to do. When I sat down with the trade representatives and we talked about this in some more length and discussed it, they agreed that perhaps a pound on the drop was, again, a rather simplistic move, and that we could be slightly more adventurous in what we did, and that there was an opportunity to rejig the fractions of a mile and to simplify how the tariff worked. So we had a lot of discussions with the trade. As you can see on page 119, there is a nice little spreadsheet there. If you want to spend half an hour with me, I'll cheerfully talk you through the spreadsheet, and you can change all the variables that are in the top part of the spreadsheet and watch the changes cascade through, which was what we did with the trade. And we came out with a version that the trade were happy with, that made sense, where the percentage rises weren't crazy. Sometimes if you change one small factor, you can have a substantial percentage change. And after some discussions, we felt that we had arrived at a tariff that we were happy to go out to public consultation on.
Any more questions? Again, okay.
There's none from anybody else, Chair. I'm just also intrigued on the analysis of the National Hackney Fares table. You very helpfully included that in the pack, so that we can see both where we are at number 93, and actually if it goes through, that we'll probably end up somewhere with Hart at number 47, if my analysis is correct. And what that means for the fine balance as far as setting the tariff, as far as both price for our residents who will be using the service, but also then the availability and the interest there may be, just thinking about your previous comment about new entrants. And just, you know, again, it would be helpful to understand that balance, isn't it? Because you could sit here and go, it's great, because actually we're trying to sort of stay relatively low as far as cost. But actually, on the other hand, we'd also have quite a lot of residents turn around and say there isn't enough availability. At peak times, you have to wait an inordinate amount of time. What's the point if there isn't any responsive service as far as... Is that something that we may be accidentally baking into the tariff?
I think that the issue we have here is that the trade in Basingstoke, like all trades, has a particular flavour. And the particular flavour in Basingstoke is if you want a black cab, you go to the railway station. And whilst there are plenty of other ranks around the town, none of them ever see a Hackney carriage. And yes, would I like to see substantially more Hackney carriages? Absolutely. Because of the nature of the Hackney carriage trade, we then have a very big private hire trade. If you go to Hart, for example, most of their vehicles are hacks, and very few private hire. We're the other way around. So the trade will respond to the restrictions that we place upon it. And the key restriction we place upon it, obviously, is that we require all Hackneys to be black cabs, which are wheelchair accessible, and will seat 5 people. That's something that has been put to this committee on several occasions, and the committee has always chosen to retain what's called the gold standard of Hackney carriages. That means that it is harder for new entrants to come in, and I am mindful of that. I'm also mindful of the fact that it is the gold standard, and these are some of the best vehicles you can have. We're increasingly putting new style hybrid electric vehicles on the rank. And I am therefore fairly comfortable that we sit where we're going to sit in the 2 mile chart afterwards, because it will encourage better class of vehicles and more flexible vehicles. As for the private hire bit, can't comment on that here.
Any more questions, members? If none, so does the committee agree to consider the proposed fares increase and agree to the proposals are put to the public consultation for a period of 14 days? If no objections are received or objections are received but are withdrawn, the table of fares will be referred to the Cabinet for approval. If any objections are received, these will be considered, and after consideration and any necessary modifications made to refer to Cabinet for approval. Do you all note it? Thank you. Over to the item number 7. May I ask Emma Coles to introduce the report. Thank you.
I get the most exciting report, the fees and charges. I'm going to work backwards. The main bit is the numbers on page 139, Appendix 2. Appendix 2 is all of the fees and charges that are set by statute. They're in here for your information. They were set in 2005 and have not gone up since 2005, but they're just there for your information. Then we're going to move to the more scary page. So we've been doing a lot of work, and as the councillor mentioned, we want to retain and grow our trade. So if you go to page 133, you'll see that there's some quite different variations on here. So our main focus, where we want to improve efficiencies for the service and be as cost efficient as possible, is for our vehicles and our drivers. And they're the top lines, and you can see we've managed this year to reduce all of those. We've looked at the MOGO, which is the new environmentally friendly stick-on plates that came with several different bits and pieces. The trade fed back to us and said, actually, we only need X, Y, and Z, so we've taken the rest out to save some money. And we're also continuously improving the process in the background to make it faster and slicker and quicker, which is less officer time, which is obviously the most expensive part of the process. And then if you go further down on the vehicles, there's some that have rather large increases. So, for example, the changing of licence type has gone up 102% and a bit. These ones with the large increases, we did a really in-depth time in motion study on top of the normal analysis that we do each year for these, and found that the fees that we were charging weren't proportional to the time that they took. But that fee that has gone up 102%, that will happen once. The ones that we work continuously on to help the trade are the vehicle ones that they have to renew every year, and the driver ones that they have to renew every 3 years. As we alluded to earlier, there's lots of standard training that has to continue. There are lots of checks that we have to do on our drivers. So the new drivers has increased, but we have managed to reduce the impact on renewal drivers. So once people are into the trade, the 3-year licence has come down by 27%. The DAT test is set separately. We can't amend that because that is the actual cost of the service that we provide. The DBS fee has gone up to £49.50. That will come into effect from the 2nd of December. That is not set by us, that's set by the government, and unfortunately we need to make sure that all of our drivers have an enhanced, and that's going to be quite an increase of 30% for them. The medical fee is also set by our independent medical advisor to check the medicals that they require. And on the page 134 is the operators' scheduler fees. These have all increased slightly. It was the first year that we'd split it into these different bands and actually found out that the enforcement needed for these bands was slightly miscalculated last year. So that has all been amended in our time and motion study in here.
5-year fee.
And it is a 5-year fee, so it's split over 5 years. And then from page 135, we've got the ones that pretty much just go up by the standard 3% that Basingstoke and Dean set for their inflation. There are a couple that are slightly higher, but not by much at all. Apart from on page 136, you'll see that the HMO fees have increased quite significantly. This is an environmental health fee that in the Constitution gets approved here, but if you have any questions for it, they need to be asked at the Housing Committee, because we just bring the fees for those ones. Sorry to confuse everybody. And then the other bits have just gone up by 3% as well. Any questions?
Yeah, 7 minutes more.
Thank you. I just, page 133, I wonder if you could just talk me through the logic, because it appears in a certain way, and I just would like to, A, be clear that it is as it appears, and B, to understand why. If we look at the difference between the vehicles and the drivers, absolutely I get that there's a decrease in the fee for new vehicles and renewals, which I could jump to the conclusions about actually making sure that we're doing everything we need to do about new vehicles and vehicles that are everything that we'd want them to be. With drivers, if I use the same logic, it doesn't seem to follow through, because there's a reduction for renewals, but an increase for new. And actually, I just repeat in some respects the same sort of feedback that I get that says actually, again, for Hackney and private hire, it feels like we should be doing more to encourage new as well as protecting and supporting existing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of the most. There's so much stuff in the legislation that we now have to check on renewal. Because a lot of that has already been done at the point of application, there are certain checks and training and bits and pieces that don't have to be done at renewal, which obviously that made us be able to bring that price down a bit. But they're statutory for them all to be done when it's a new driver. And yes, we agree, we want to encourage as many people into the trade as possible, but that is the minimum cost that it costs us.
So the assumption, if I may, Emma, that sounds like your objective is to make the service cost neutral. And I just wonder, where's the flexibility to turn around and say, as an authority, we accept that actually you guys as officers would do your best to set tariffs that would mean we were cost neutral. But actually, if, as the authority, we decided to invest because we wanted new people to join the trade, that decision would be taken somewhere and there'd be a recommendation given to us if that was given to you as an objective. And I'm just wondering where that conversation happens.
Strangely, this is a me question, not an Emma question. Yeah, effectively what you're saying is would we subsidise the cost to encourage drivers into the process? I think that we don't tend to do that. I would say that for most drivers, what you have to remember here is that whilst there is a charge there for our time, there's plenty of other costs in there. We probably constitute roughly 50% of their cost. So we would have to slash that fee by a fair chunk. It probably, I haven't worked out the maths. Emma may know how many new drivers we're getting a year.
We're getting roughly 7 a month so far this year.
Okay, so cost-wise then, 6 or 7 a month times 12. Yeah, it's not, times 300 odd. It's probably not going to be a huge amount. The issue is whether that actually is the key incentive to get drivers in. I mean, the trade will tell you that their difficulty is finding drivers in the first place. The cost is the cost isn't the key barrier to that, I don't think. They're just competing a lot. The main thing for them really is how much can the drivers earn, because we are competing very much with the sudden plethora of Deliveroo and TNT and DPD and all those delivery companies that are using the same people to do slightly different jobs but same skill set.
And I suppose that's fundamentally why I asked the question, because if I did that assessment, and I've got a brilliant pack in front of me to make that assessment that says, if I was thinking about being a driver, where would I do it? And I look at the Hackney fares table and what we've potentially got in our tariffs for private hire. I look at what the fees and charges for my application, and actually I do a little bit of research on the local authorities that pay more on tariff, the flag's higher, and the licence fee is cheaper. I potentially wouldn't choose to be a taxi driver or private hire driver here in Basingstoke and Dean. I'd go to one of the authorities that's higher up the list, because actually I can pay less and earn more. And that's why I asked the question about where is that conversation happening. And actually, Rob, I get you're running a service. I wonder where that options paper comes from that says, what's your objective, councillors? What would you like to do? And what are you going to task us to go and prepare for you if those are your objectives? And actually what I heard you say wasn't actually any of that. So, and that's really my point, Chair, if I may, that says actually, if we're sitting here going, one of absolutely objective is a safe service. Another one of our objectives, which we seem to be doing really well, is actually we want our vehicles to be as green and clean and safe as we can. Brilliant. But we also want a service that is truly responsive and open and encourages both people to stay, but also new entrants. There's something about where does that conversation happen in the round about cost and time to join, wanting to stay, and the rewards as far as how the tariff works, so that we have a proper conversation when we're being asked to make some decisions or accept recommendations. And that's really my big question throughout all of the papers. Because actually, individually, it feels like some of the fees and charging rates, the logic is different depending on the paper that we've got in front of us. And I'm not sure whether that's the portfolio holder's responsibility to make sure that those options are discussed, or ours, because lots of these things come to us because it's a statutory committee.
Valid question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I see your logic. I think the one comment I would say in there that is as I mentioned earlier, the majority of our trade is in the private hire, which obviously their recompense is not within our control. Yeah, I mean Hackney carriages are fairly unique in that your prices are set by the local authority. We don't set the price of shoes or, cucumbers or anything like that. That's the free market. But for hackney carriages, we do control that, and that's why we take the tariff setting as a responsible process. But private hire, which provides most of the transport for us, is completely free market, and we have no influence over that whatsoever. And I would argue that for the majority of our drivers, the price they get paid and then how much share of they get from their operator is something over which we have no control. Much as we would like to have that control, we don't. And the bit of the trade that we do control, we control a lot of, is pretty static, to be honest with you. So, yeah.
Councillor Ganesh. Are you happy?
One more question from a completely different subject. Which is just, I want to be really clear about the HMO statements. I think in lots of wards we would see them as a complete scourge, and would love the idea that we could price people out of wanting to do it. And he said boldly. So for me, there's something that just turns around and says, I just want to be clear about the conversation about the range of the rates happens somewhere else, not just the price. Are we expecting just the price, nothing else to do with HMOs to be discussed, but the price to be discussed here?
I knew I'd get the environmental health question. That's the only environmental health officer in the room. So, yeah, again, the issue here is that we have the Westminster principle, which is, as Westminster, we're trying to charge sex establishments £22,000 for their licence, and strangely enough got their fingers rather badly burnt in the Court of Appeal. So that the precedent is now set that your fees have to be representative for the costs that are incurred. And that's one of the reasons why these costs have gone up markedly. Because we have been a lot more proactive, we're spending a lot more money on enforcement, and as you've probably seen in the press, we've had some convictions, and we're making some progress with some of our less reputable landlords, whilst hopefully improving those ones who take their role seriously and provide a good service. HMOs are an essential part of our housing thing. They may not be very popular, and they do bring challenges. There's no doubt about that. And if you are in an area where there are big houses which are easily split into flats, and there's plenty of those in the UK, then you're going to see, HMOs appear, because again, it's a free market out there. Effectively, there is a need for that type of housing. Housing in Basingstoke is expensive, therefore those people who don't earn very much need lower cost housing. Our role here is to ensure that it is of good quality. But that doesn't stop there being problems of car parking and noise and litter and 3 sets of bins or 5 sets of bins or all those other things that do impact upon your residents. There's no doubt about that, and that varies from ward to ward. But a bit like the taxi licensing, our responsibility as a licensing team or a housing team is to ensure that they are safe and fit places to live. Yeah.
Any questions, members? If not, thank you. So Item number 8, any review of the work programs. Do you have any comments from the members on the work program? Any suggestions? If you have any suggestions offline, you can always send an email to either Emma or Rob. Otherwise, do you want to say anything? No? Nothing? I don't think we have any confidential matters to raise.
No.
Otherwise, thank you very much, members. I declare the meeting is closed.